Hi everybody, Kerrie here at the North East Autism Society, and today I am joined by Kieran Rose, and we're going to have a little chat about spiky profiles. So Kieran, before we start, could you introduce yourself?
Hi Kerrie, my name's Kieran, obviously, and I'm a writer and a trainer and a consultant all about autism, and I was diagnosed as autistic when I was 23.
Okay, so the topic today, Kieran, which I was really keen to chat to you about, is something that I've been reading a lot about recently, spiky profiles in autistic people. So what does that term mean? What is a spiky profile?
It's a bit of a confusing thing that can be you can apply it to different layers of not just autistic people, as humanity. Everybody's got a spiky profile. And it's basically what it's talking about is skills, everyday kind of skills. So communication, your ability to do things, how you develop, all the things that humans generally do on an average basis. But when it comes to autistic people, the term spiky profiles is applied to us because sometimes we can be really good at some things and not as good at other things. And that's generally more spiky than the everyday kind of average person. But that also, there's lots of different ways of looking at it. You could look at it, if you look at autistic people in isolation, yes, we have very spiky profiles. But actually, if you look across the human population as a whole, everybody has strengths and weaknesses in different areas. And if you think about autism as a neurology, I'm going to say the word monotropism, which is a big word. It basically means having a mind that's driven by interests. So if you are very interested in something, your skills are going to be towards whatever that interest is. So I don't know, you might love reading, so your comprehension might be really, really high. You might be able to read really, really, really quickly and take in lots of information like that. But because that's your interest, because you're driven towards that, other things might not work on other things as much. So you don't develop as strong skills in other areas that aren't pertinent towards your interest driven mind. So it's just a really interesting notion, but it can also be problematic as well, because when we talk about spiky profiles, often everybody jumps towards where the weaker areas are and they don't look at the strengths.
Of course, yeah. And I think it's really important what you said, is that we all have spiky profiles, but from what I've read, Kieran, it's kind of suggesting that there's a bigger difference almost in autistic people than non-autistic people.
Yeah, the way I kind of look at it, if you look at it's not just non-autistic people, because this applies to anyone really who's neurodivergent. Everybody who's neurodivergent has a spikier profile. But generally non-autistic people, if you consider their profiles like hills, so they're a bit bumpy, but there's kind of a bit like a general practitioner, a GP kind of thing, good at a little bit of everything kind of thing.
Yeah.
Able to kind of cover most areas. But for autistic people, it's generally more like the Himalayas. So you would have really, really good strengths in some things and actually really quite big, I hate using the word weaknesses, it's not the right word, but kind of not as good at other areas.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Because I read somewhere that there's one gentleman who describes it as kind of peaks and troughs and very significant kind of steep hills, and whereas non-autistic people would be more like the little bumpy roads.
And it's quite problematic as well, because like I said before, if you're constantly looking only at weaknesses or deficits as they are applied to us, which is an even more horrible word, you ignore the strengths. You don't take into account those strengths, and those strengths actually can be absolutely amazing and can take you to amazing places. But if you're forever focusing on what are perceived as weaknesses, but those weaknesses aren't often things that actually can really be improved on, because of the way that the neurology works. You know, if your brain and your nervous system decide that some things aren't as appropriate for you than other things, then you're never going to drag those skills up to any kind of level where it's kind of an outside perception. Because autism is viewed by non-autistic people, and because autistic people are viewed by non-autistic people, we are constantly compared to non-autistic people. And you can't do that, because it's two completely different neurologies that work in very, very different ways. And but that's part of the problem with it.
So would you describe yourself as having a spiky profile, Kieran, and how, if you could share, how does that look for you?
Yeah, I mean, outwardly, from, again, this is part of the problem. From an outside perception, people would probably say, no, Kieran hasn't got a spiky profile. But that's where I always talk about masking. This is where masking comes in, because masking can actually hide the troughs. And it can cover up those kind of bits where you are weaker. So for me, I am, like I said, I'm a trainer, I'm a public speaker, I talk all the time. I'm sure people have seen me talking somewhere or heard me talking. But speech is a really, really draining and inefficient way of communicating for me. I can blurt out 20,000 words in 3 hours. Writing is an amazing way of communicating for me. Speech is not a good way of communicating for me. But that's an example of where masking interplays with all this, because actually, because I can speak, people think I don't have a problem with speaking, but actually I'll come away from doing this video and I'll probably not speak to anyone for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, so it's a really kind of, it's a complicated thing. That's why you need that internal experience. You need to understand what's going on inside, and you can only get that by talking to autistic people, because from the outside, everything looks fine.
Yeah, absolutely, which is why we're here today. So I think, Kieran, we're going to leave it there, because I think that was just a really general introduction to spiky profiles. But I think for parents watching this, what I would say is it's a very complex topic, isn't it? And there's lots of different strands to this. So we've only really touched the surface. So I would definitely recommend that you do some reading around spiky profiles, and we'll put some credible resources out there. But thank you so much for joining us today, Kieran. I shall see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.